What's up, everyone? If you love manga stories, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Manga Fiction, and let's get straight into the story. Kotoba Sekai is a man who lived a life perfectly described by the term social misfit. As a so-called shut-in and a hardcore NEET, he rarely left the sanctuary of his home. But for some reason, one specific day, he decided to leave the house to visit a convenience store. Fate was cruel. Inside, he found a robber attacking the store clerk, screaming, "Hey, hand over the money!" Kotoba froze. At first, he only thought about worrying about his own life, but then he looked at the clerk. Wait, I think I've seen this shop clerk somewhere before, he realized. It was Kasumi Kaede. Though they had hardly ever spoken directly, he had a one-sided crush on her in college. Seeing her in a dangerous state, Kotoba ignored his fear, and he rushed the robber, shouting a desperate, "Die!" The robber was stunned, yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" In the chaos, Kotoba was mortally wounded. He looked at the crying clerk and squeezed out his final words, "Kaede-san, run away." As the world faded, he thought, if my life, which is like this, can save someone, I'm glad to hear that. He woke up in a radiant void before a goddess. "You have unfortunately passed away," she told him bluntly. She explained that while he died trying to protect a woman, the outcome wouldn't have changed anyway. Kotoba slumped. Is it just a meaningless death? The goddess, however, appreciated his actions. She saw him as a no-good NEET who risked his life for someone else in the very end. "Isn't that a beautiful story?" she asked. To Kotoba, it was just his life, a life that wasn't that good of a thing. Seeing his pain, the goddess offered him reincarnation. "Don't you want to try living life again in another world?" Kotoba, desperate for a second chance, begged, "Please, I beg of you, can we start life over again?" The goddess smiled and granted him one special request. Kotoba remembered his end being stabbed to death and the weakness that caused it. He screamed his wish. "If I had the strength to not die even when stabbed, I want to become the strongest being in the world." He wanted to properly protect someone this time. "Then, what a wonderful wish you have," she replied. He felt a drowsy kind of comfort, like being held by his mother. He felt like he had transcended humanity. But when he opened his eyes, everything was wrong. Huh? Here? What the heck is this? He wasn't a giant or a hero. I've become a sprouting grass. He realized with horror that if this continues, he won't be able to do anything. Years passed. That grass grew into the legendary world tree. Now, adventurers visit his children saying, "Thanks to the blessing of the world tree, I was able to become an adventurer." In a small village where various races live, the people look up and shout, "Good morning, World Tree Sama." Kotoba had finally become the strongest body that can't be killed even if stabbed.
Suddenly, a gigantic foot stomped him hard. It was from a chubby bully who was picking on another boy named Aruto. He said someone like him should crawl on the ground like a worm, and poor Aruto only moaned, humiliated in front of the other boys. Guruto, with a sadistic smile, stated that a farmer's son would be a farmer until death. He boasted of being the son of the village chief and ordered Aruto to obey him, before leaving laughing. Meanwhile, the plant, or rather, our protagonist, concluded that being trampled hurt a lot, and looked with pity at the boy who had also been beaten. Aruto then got up and, worried, approached him, asking if the little plant was okay. The boy wondered what he should do, for it would be a shame if someone trampled him again. That was when he saw some pieces of broken wood on the ground, and an idea came to his mind. With the pieces of wood, Aruto built a small fence, saying that now no one would trample him again. The boy then left, leaving behind the little sprout now protected by the improvised fence he had built. That simple wooden protection was a gesture of pure kindness in a world that, until then, had only shown him cruelty. Moved, he thought that boy was a good person, a true angel in his new and strange life. As the boy walked away whistling, he thanked him for that act of kindness. Our hero promised he would not forget that favor, and with all his heart wished that boy would be happy forever. And so, he watched the boy disappear on the horizon. Days passed, and the scorching sun punished the land mercilessly, bringing a long drought to the entire region. The heat was intense, and little by little he began to feel his plant body wither under the blazing sun. His throat was completely dry, and the sensation of dehydration became increasingly desperate for him. He feared that, if it continued like that, without a drop of rain, he would end up dying before even being able to grow. He wished the boy would return to water him, but instead, a small and strange creature slowly approached. It was a slime, a small blob of water with curious eyes. The gelatinous creature jumped over the little wooden fence, getting closer and closer to the base of his stem, and to his surprise, the slime began to pour out a bit of its own body to water him, as if offering its very life. He couldn't believe the kindness of that creature. Each drop he received was like a balm, reviving his leaves and bringing back his hope. Despite the relief, he worried about what would happen to the little slime after that act, for by giving him water, its body would certainly shrink. But the slime seemed not to care, responding with a happy sound. He was touched by that creature, who was a good fellow for not caring about its own life to help him. Thanks to that sacrifice, he felt he was growing more and more each day, strengthening himself with that water. With his heart full of gratitude, he begged the heavens for that small and kind slime to be happy. A shining energy then flowed from his leaves, moving toward the little creature like a kind of blessing. After that day, the slime began to visit him every few days, always returning to its normal size to water him. At night, the creature would go to a small lake to replenish itself and regain its original size. It would dive into the water, slowly absorbing it to prepare for its next visit to the little plant. That was when, suddenly, the blessing he had received seemed to take effect. Meanwhile, in a small village called Pokot, not far from there, an important event was about to happen. In the village church, a coming-of-age ceremony was being held for all children who turned 14 years old. The priest explained that a skill was like a gift granted by the gods, a unique power for each individual. In that world, upon reaching that age, children received their skills, which would define the rest of their lives. Among them was Aruto, who dreamed of becoming an adventurer. From the altar, the priest wished that all of them would receive the skills that best suited each one. The youths then lined up, one by one, anxiously awaiting the moment that would change their destinies forever. That was when Gerudo approached Aruto and warned him not to get too full of himself. With an arrogant smile, he said that trash like Aruto wouldn't get a decent skill, and boasted that he would receive the holy sword skill. Awkwardly, the boy just agreed, trying not to cause trouble with the village chief's son. Soon after, the priest called Aruto to approach the altar. He walked with determination, stopping before the sacred artifact that would grant him his power. With the artifact in hand, he felt the energy flow, and the priest instructed him to open his status to see what he had received. That was when the symbol of the blessing he had received from the little plant began to glow in his hand, and to everyone's surprise, a status screen appeared, revealing the skill Blessing of the World Tree with UR rarity. The priest was completely shocked, for never in his life had he heard of a skill like that. He congratulated him, impressed that he had obtained such a rare skill. The entire church erupted in celebration, with everyone rejoicing over the appearance of an ultra-rare level skill in the village. His parents cried with joy, proud of their son's great achievement, who now had a bright future ahead. While Aruto celebrated, Gerudo watched him from afar, gnawing his nails in pure envy and rage. He grumbled that he would show everyone an even better skill, convinced of his own superiority. The priest then called him to receive his blessing, and the boy walked arrogantly, but upon checking his status, he discovered he had received a cursed skill that reduced his experience by 120%. His father, the village chief, was furious, yelling at his son for having received such a disgraceful skill. Outside, a girl named Beatrice ran to Aruto, asking if he was really going to leave the village to become an adventurer. He thanked her for the support, but admitted that he still couldn't believe it, and wondered if he would be able to achieve his dream. She encouraged him, saying that with a UR skill, he would certainly be fine and have much success in his journeys. Encouraged by her words, he decided to try, and with a smile showed her the mark on his hand. With that, he was sure that the little sprout he had protected in the forest was, in fact, the World Tree itself. Then, 20 years passed, and Aruto, who had acquired the blessing of the World Tree, had become a renowned adventurer. After many adventures, he retired and returned to the village of Pokot to live a peaceful life. Upon arriving home, his son Jiru asked about the protection of the World Tree he had heard so much about, and Aruto confirmed that this protection had been granted to him by that tree, to whom he was eternally grateful. His wife Beatrice told their son that he too should be kind and respectful to the World Tree. Looking at a pile of firewood, Aruto remembered the fence he had once built around our protagonist and said it was time to rebuild it. He asked his son to go ahead, for he would later take a look at the tree that had blessed him. 20 years after his reincarnation, Kotoba had finally grown and become a small tree 2 meters tall. Although he had grown, his trunk was still thin, and he felt his development had slowed down in recent times. That was when Jiro approached. The boy noticed that the fence around the tree was falling apart with time. Carefully, he picked up one of the rotten wooden pieces and said it was time to get rid of that old, broken fence. But a feeling of panic overwhelmed our hero as he realized that fence and the slime were the only things that had stayed with him for 20 years. Jiro, however, only put his hands together in prayer, completely unaware of Sekai's despair. The boy thanked the world tree for the UR skill his father had received, but our hero had no idea what the hell that was. He then noticed the resemblance between Jiro and the boy who had built the fence for him so many years ago, and wondered if there was something wrong with his perception, or if that boy was truly the son of that kind boy. Suddenly, Bilguroto's son appeared with a huge sword on his shoulder, asking Jiro what he was doing there. He said he was planning to use that tree to practice his sword moves. With a look of contempt, he told Jiro to get out of his way so he could start his training. Hearing that, Sekai was completely shocked. However, Jiro stood in front of Bilgu, saying he wouldn't forgive such a disrespectful act against the sacred tree. He declared that this was the world tree, and that in hundreds of years, it would become a grand entity. But Bilgu laughed, finding it ridiculous that this skinny tree could be the legendary world tree, and soon grew furious, shouting if the boy was mocking him. The fat boy threatened him, saying that if he didn't move, he would be crushed along with the tree. With his sword in hand, he prepared to strike, and then he slammed it hard into the ground. With a piece of wood, Jiro tried to defend himself, and soon began a relentless flurry of attacks. The force of the blow made Bilgu lose his balance. His hand throbbed in pain, and the heavy sword he carried fell to the ground out of his reach. At that moment, our hero arrived at the scene, scolding Bilgu for his arrogant behavior. He warned him to show respect for nature, or else he would provoke the wrath of forces greater than him. Completely terrified, Bilgu grabbed his sword and ran away, saying he was going home. Surprised by the intervention, Jiro looked at his father. Aruto praised his son for using the sword technique he had taught him, and said it was time to build a new fence, and together, father and son walked toward the tree. Seeing all this, Sekai wished Jiro luck, grateful to have such good people taking care of him. He still wondered why everyone called him the world tree, but that mystery no longer bothered him. Since Jiro left, his life had returned to being peaceful, but his growth remained slow and tedious. He wondered when he would finally become a great tree. That was when a huge slime appeared, bouncing toward him with contagious and cheerful energy. Surprised, he wondered what that giant creature was, which seemed twice the size he remembered. The slime acted as if it were celebrating their reunion after so long apart. Sekai then realized that this was the same slime from before, which had now grown and evolved. He noticed how big the slime had become. He thanked it for giving him water again, but soon after, something unexpected happened. Dozens of other smaller slimes appeared, all looking at him with admiration and curiosity, and to his astonishment, he realized that all those little slimes were the children of his old friend. The little creatures then began pouring water over him, watering him all at once, in a joint effort to help him grow faster. The small slimes took turns, ensuring he received an abundant amount of water to strengthen himself, and thanks to them, Sekai finally grew considerably, reaching about 3 meters in height. However, even with all that help, his growth had stagnated for several years. He wondered why he wasn't growing anymore, imagining he might be lacking nutrients. That was when a wolf appeared in the clearing. The creature growled, moving closer and closer to the base of his trunk. Sekai wondered what that wolf wanted with him, feeling a chill run through his branches. That was when the wolf positioned itself in a very familiar way, making him panic. And I should censor this, but it's funny, so screw it. The wolf focused, with its eyes bulging. It tried to free the Po from its prison, and with one last howl of relief, it finally finished what it had come to do, leaving an unwanted gift behind. Sekai declared he had gone through real hell, but to his surprise, he noticed something strange happening in his branches right after that bizarre event. New shoots began to sprout, growing quickly at a pace he had never experienced before. He realized that all that sudden growth was thanks to the gift the wolf had left. After all, it was a natural fertilizer, rich in nutrients and magical power, perfect for his development. As the wolf walked away, he thought that, in the end, he should be grateful to that creature for having helped him. Thus, he cast a blessing, wishing good fortune to smile upon that wolf. The next day, the same wolf returned, but now it looked completely different, with horns and a powerful aura. It then approached and, to Sekai's astonishment, apologized for what it had done the day before. Sekai realized that, thanks to his blessing, the wolf had evolved and gained consciousness, which was something unheard of. He accepted the apology, saying that, in fact, it was thanks to him that he had managed to grow. As a gesture of remorse, the wolf brought a pile of monster carcasses, offering them as a gift. Sekai was confused by that offering, not knowing what to do with all those dead animals. But the wolf explained that they would also serve as nourishment, and that its excrement would be even better as fertilizer. The carcasses were then buried around his roots, providing a feast of nutrients for him. With a nod, the other wolves bowed in respect before leaving with their leader. Our hero thanked them for the gift, knowing that the monster carcasses, rich in magical energy, would help him grow. After that, the wolves began to visit him regularly. Even a giant spider started building its nest in his branches, contributing to his ecosystem. Over time, he finally became a magnificent tree, surpassing 7 meters in height. He felt proud of his growth, remembering when he was just a little sprout being trampled. That was when a group of villagers appeared, all carrying axes. Sakai wondered what those men wanted with him, but was willing to help however he could. The leader of the group, an old man, smiled sinisterly. That was when one of the men said enthusiastically, "It was time to cut him down." Hearing that, Sakai panicked, screaming in despair for his life that had barely begun. The sharp blade of the axe came dangerously close to his trunk, but suddenly, the villagers stopped. However, the dumbest brute prepared to strike, questioning why they had stopped. Meanwhile, Sakai and the spider on his branch begged them to stop. That was when a powerful howl echoed through the forest, interrupting the attack at the last second. The pack of evolved wolves charged at high speed, running to protect their benefactor. The villagers were terrified, not understanding the reason for the sudden appearance of those fierce beasts. In an instant, the wolves surrounded the men, forming a protective barrier around the tree. They bared their teeth and growled furiously, making it clear they wouldn't let anyone approach. Sweat dripped down the villagers' faces as they trembled in fear. Sakai then realized that those wolves were there to protect him, repaying the blessing he had given. The old man screamed in terror, asking where the wolves had come from. Frightened, the men promised not to cut the tree. Thus, they dropped their axes and fled, begging for forgiveness as they ran. The spider in his branches sighed in relief, grateful to have escaped that dangerous situation. Sakai regretted not being able to communicate to thank the wolves, but hoped he would have the chance one day. With that, he sent a blessing in gratitude, as the villagers moved away, lamenting the loss of the tree. The old man said he had been watching that tree for a long time and still didn't understand what the wolves wanted. Upon spotting another tree, one of the men suggested they try cutting it instead, since it looked like a good option. But as they approached, a small demon emerged from the bushes, scaring them once again. Over time, he continued to grow, becoming a splendid 9-meter-tall tree. And finally, after so many years of waiting and care, he managed to bear his first fruit. It was a dark and shiny fruit, but he had no idea what kind it was, much less if it was edible. Suddenly, his slime friend appeared, and from the ground looked intently at that fruit. It made cheerful sounds upon receiving the warm welcome of the tree it so admired. As always, it watered him with care, and Sakai thanked it for the water that kept him alive and strong. As a form of gratitude, he decided to give the slime one of his precious fruits, hoping to return the favor. With a gentle sway of his branches, he let the fruit fall, hoping his friend would like the gift. The slime then absorbed the fruit into its body, curious to know what taste that mysterious offering had, and Sakai watched anxiously, hoping the fruit would please his longtime friend's palate. Suddenly, the slime began to shine intensely. A brilliant aura enveloped it completely, making its form change rapidly. And to Sakai's surprise, the slime was evolving once again, transforming into a majestic creature. It now wore a crown and a cape, and for the first time, it could speak, its first words being, "Thanks to the world tree." Happy to finally return the favor, the now Slime King thanked him for the fruit of evolution he had received. Sakai then understood that those were fruits of evolution, capable of transforming the creatures that consumed them. As a test, he also gave the fruits to the wolves, who always brought him nutrients for his growth. The creatures ate the fruits eagerly. They seemed to love the taste, and a powerful energy began to emanate from their bodies. With that, they too began to evolve, gaining a new and surprising form. To everyone's astonishment, the wolves transformed into werewolves. They looked at their new bodies, shocked and confused by the transformation they had undergone. The pack leader didn't understand what was happening, but his companions soon found the answer. They howled in gratitude, attributing the evolution to the blessing of the world tree and its miraculous fruits. The leader, immensely grateful, decided that they should settle there to protect their benefactor. However, the only female of the group questioned whether just the 4 of them would be enough to protect the world tree. With that in mind, they decided to return to their territory to bring the rest of the pack and live all together. Before leaving, they bowed in gratitude, promising they would repay that kindness forever. Sakai was surprised to see them walking on 2 legs and speaking. He took pride in his size, but still thought that the title of World Tree was an exaggeration for him. As he watched the birds flying in the sky, he felt at peace with his role in that world. But that tranquility didn't last long. For some time later, a group of humans appeared in the clearing. They carried an elderly priest who seemed to be very ill. Sakai realized they were a religious group, and their leader was clearly in his final moments of life. He then remembered his fruits of evolution, thinking they might help that poor man. With a gesture of kindness, he let one of his fruits fall near the group, hoping they would notice it. One of the acolytes found the fruit and, without thinking twice, cut it into pieces to give to his master. He begged the priest to eat it to regain his strength. The old priest then ate the fruit, and suddenly, a bright light enveloped him, and he felt his vitality fully restored in an instant. To everyone's astonishment, the priest stood up, completely healed and rejuvenated by the fruit he had eaten. He believed that the fruit's power had saved him, declaring that this was the sacred tree from their scriptures. Everyone then knelt, revering the tree that had granted them that miracle, shouting in praise. Though he thought it was an exaggeration, Sakai was happy to have managed to help someone else with his powers. Our hero noticed the symbol of the Eldritch religion on their clothes, confirming they were a group of fanatics. A few days later, another creature approached, attracted by the scent of his fruits of evolution. This time, it was a hungry lizard. hard, staring at the fruit with desire. It seemed that now Seke had a quality that attracted all kinds of beings, becoming a beacon for the needy. After eating the fruit, the lizard also evolved, transforming into a powerful and muscular lizardman. The creature thanked the world tree for its help, while Seke wondered if it might not be bad to give fruits to everyone he met. As a form of gratitude, the lizard regurgitated something, asking the tree to accept that gift. He explained that it was a jewel called dragonite, a magical ore that formed in his body. With a smile, he thanked him once again before leaving, promising he would return one day to repay the favor. After that, Seke watched the lizard man leave, not knowing what to do with that stone he had received. Soon our hero, seeing so much reverence, finally accepted that perhaps he really was the world tree. On another day, an unknown man approached, asking if he could take the jewel that was there. Seke saw no problem, since he had no use for it, and allowed the man to take it. The man, named Mokoro Bolt, introduced himself as a merchant who had been betrayed and abandoned in the forest. With the fruit and the jewel in hand, he thanked the divinity for the blessing. As the merchant walked away, Seke was happy to have helped another soul in need. After that, the man spread the story of the miraculous fruit, which eventually became a famous book. The merchant sold the jewel, and with the money, started his own successful business. Surprisingly, the blessing of the world tree had been added to the merchant's status. With that, Mokoro's luck attribute had tripled, guaranteeing him prosperity in his business. The story spread, and the world tree became a legend, known for its blessings and miracles. Sometime later, Mokoro returned, thanking our protagonist for having changed his life. He announced that he had bought those lands, and that from that moment on, he would protect them from all evil. Seke was grateful for the kindness, happy to have someone willing to protect him from future threats. A sign was placed, forbidding anyone from cutting down the sacred tree that grew there. Since then, the merchant's private army began patrolling the area, ensuring his safety. But that peace didn't last long, for the Eldritch religious returned, determined to take him. The priest, with a fanatical look, declared they should take the tree to their headquarters and nurture it. But one of Mokoro's guards immediately confronted them, asking what they were doing there. Terrified, the religious fled, for they knew they were trespassing on the company's private property. The guard thanked Mokoro for the protection. Thanks to him, Sekai could live in peace for a while, growing stronger and stronger. He reached 10 meters in height, becoming an imposing presence in that forest. However, being a giant tree also brought its own problems and daily challenges. Winter was extremely cold, and without clothes, he suffered with the snow and freezing temperatures. Insects also became a problem, for with his size, many of them began living on his body. He didn't mind the cute insects, but most of the creatures inhabiting him were disgusting. Although he understood they needed a place to live, the feeling of them crawling was unpleasant, until one specific monster appeared and solved his problems. To his great relief, it was a cave spider, a creature he had heard about from the villagers' conversations. He wondered why it had left its natural habitat, but didn't complain about its presence. After all, he was extremely grateful, for it ate all the disgusting insects off his bark. As thanks, our hero decided to give it one of his fruits, as he had done with other beings. After eating the fruit, the cave spider evolved, transforming into a powerful forest spider, and to repay the favor, the spider wove thick, warm webs around his trunk, protecting him from the cold. With his body warmed, he welcomed the spiders, allowing them to stay as long as they wanted. But on a day of terrible blizzard, a group of creatures appeared, fleeing the relentless storm. They were goblins, with their pointed skins and ears, seeking refuge under his wide, protective branches. All were soaked and shivering from the cold, desperate for a safe shelter from the blizzard. To Sekai's surprise, one of the goblins could speak and led the group in search of a safe place. This goblin felt a divine power emanating from the tree, realizing that this was a special and safe place. With that, he announced to everyone that this would be the new home of their tribe, the place of a new beginning. Sekai listened to their plans, surprised by the idea that a village would be built around him. He wondered if he was about to become part of a community,